All right. So what else have you been doing besides the ortho show? Tell us about what you've been doing about COVID.
So I decided I wanted to cure COVID.
Yeah, that's
So,
good.
as an orthopedic surgeon, I decided that I'm going to become the principal investigator of a COVID-19 ARDS randomized pilot trial. Why not?
Back up, back up. Tell our viewers what ARDS is.
Okay, that's adult respiratory distress syndrome. It's also the cytokine storm that's seen in COVID. What happens is we don't die from COVID. We die from our over crazy immune response to the virus that basically sets up this crazy storm of inflammation that floods your lungs. You can't breathe. There's fluid in there. Then you get intubated. And if you get intubated, the mortality rate is exceptionally high.
What does
And
that
what
have to do with Scott Sigmund, follow the throw, the orthopedic surgeon?
Exactly. How do we get to putting our laser in the hospital for treating COVID? So I've been using laser, again, the opioid sparing approach of how I practice. It was sort of a natural progression to find alternative treatments for pain. And that alternative treatment was basically this laser that we found that has great basic science and clinical background to show improvement in pain and inflammation, both for acute and chronic pain. So I started using it about 3 years ago. We opened up our own clinic. We're now franchising across the country. But the thing that really sort of became a sort of this beacon of idea for me was that when we were using the laser for acute inflammation for orthopedic conditions like a bad ankle sprain or a knee sprain or fractures or bruising and ecchymosis, or I should say bruising and swelling, the laser like 100% melts acute inflammation away over a very rapid period, unlike anything I had seen previous in clinical practice. So I said, okay, it really works well on acute inflammation in the ankle or the knee or the hip or the shoulder. Why can't it work for COVID, which is basically acute or crazy inflammation gone haywire? And so basically, I went to the hospital. I went to the IRB, which is the Institutional Review Board. So you can't just do a study. You got to go and talk to some smart people, and they think about it. Is it a good idea? Are we going to hurt anybody? That sort of thing. So the IRB looks at me and says, well, that's a great idea, Scott, but we don't know really much about lasers. So we're going to need some guidance from the FDA. So I said, okay, no problem. I'm going to call the FDA.
Mhm.
And in the crazy world of pandemic, I got a call back 6 hours later.
Wow,
It was really unbelievable.
that's
And then we gave them all the specs of our laser, and over a 6-day window, the FDA got back to us and said, we understand this is an FDA cleared device for musculoskeletal inflammation, and now it is a non-significant risk device for a pulmonary study for COVID. I took that back to the IRB. They looked at me and said, okay, this sounds a little mashugana, but we'll let you do it. And so sure enough, now I'm thinking to myself, all right, okay, we got the laser, I got the approval. I mean, I know what the dose is for the hip or for the knee. What am I supposed to do for the lungs? And so I got out the Google machine and I just started, plugging in stuff, COVID, laser, etc. And all of a sudden there's this website called ResearchGate. And it's basically it's like the LinkedIn for research geeks around the world, scientists who are doing projects, etc. And I got in there, and it just so happens that two MD PhDs from Canada had just written a paper on the theory of using laser for COVID.
oh,
So
that's convenient. That's
this whole
amazing.
story is it's such a weird sort of vibe as to how it all came together. And so I DM'd Soheila McMully, who is now become a dear friend of mine, and she's like, yeah, we could do this. And I've been using it on patients with COPD. I've been using it on patients with asthma. We've seen some good results. So I said, look, here are the specs of my laser. Can you give me some ideas as to what the dose should be? 45 minutes later, she calls me back and says, here's the dose. I plug it into the laser and the numbers came out right. And I'm like, oh my God, this is really cool. And then we brought the laser in, and this is in the midst of the pandemic. It's super bad up here in Boston. The morale is low. Everything is shut down. Only patients in the hospital are COVID patients. We have three, basically. We've gone from one ICU to 4 ICUs. The morale of the nurses and the doctors is super low because we're really not treating anybody. They're just sort of watching the patients. Unfortunately, many of them were dying. Then there was no real active treatment. The malaria drug wasn't really out or working. And then there was remdesivir, which is the antiviral, which we didn't really have either. And so we went ahead and we brought the laser in, and I'll never forget it. So we talked to the first patient, the case report's out. It's now been published in a peer review case report journal, the American Journal of Case Reports. So we're very happy that the first in human patient that's had has had laser for COVID has been peer reviewed and published. So we walk in the room, and he was just a very gentle, kind man. And I looked at him and said, you know, this has never been done before, but I've got this laser, and theoretically, I think it can help you.
Was he on a ventilator or just oxygen? What was his?
He had just rolled out of the ICU. He was on 6 liters of oxygen in the ICU. They brought him down to the floor, monitor floor. He was on 3 liters. He was failing to thrive. He was not able to get out of bed. He was barely eating. He was a sick individual. And basically, he just looked at me and said, "Doc, sure, why not? Let's give this a try." And I always find that profound, that somebody's willing to try something that's really never been tried before. And we rolled him over into the prone position, which is how you do the laser. And the laser's about 20 centimeters above the skin. It never touches the patient. And
you don't have any pictures of your machine, do you?
Yeah, can I share my screen here? Yeah, let's see if I can share the screen. Host disabled. You've disabled me, Brad. You need to let me do that. Seth, where are you, Seth?
Help me, Seth.
Come on, let the fro in here, Seth. Let's go.
Share screen. That's my screen, right?
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of a thing that you can do while he's doing that. But I can tell you,
okay.
we put him in the prone position.
You can do it now.
Oh, he said I can do it now.
Yes,
okay,
Seth is somehow giving you permission.
All right, we're going to share my desktop. Now let me see if I can find what I want to do here. Hold on a second, guys. Okay, here we go.
Are there any questions? I can't see the Facebook page, but are
guys, can you see this now? Can we see the video okay?
Can we see this now, Seth?
Are you seeing what I see?
Are we seeing what he's seeing? Is that is it live? Yes, sir. Okay. I think everybody's seeing it.
Okay, good. So here we are. Here's the patient. He's in the prone position. You can see the laser here. It's a mobile scanner, so it never touches the patient. It's about 20 centimeters above. And what's cool about this laser, it's a cold laser. It doesn't generate any significant heat. So you don't have to worry about burning the patient or creating blisters or anything along those lines. And what's remarkable, you can't hear the pulse ox in the back, but they actually get better in the midst of the treatment.
Oh my God. So the pulse ox gets better.
It gets better. And now so some of the critique on our study was, well, the reason it's getting better is because you're in the prone position. But actually the truth is, you have to be in the prone position for about 5 to 6 hours to start seeing improved oxygenation. So that's really not what was happening. It was really the laser that was working. So we saw his pulse ox go from 92, 93 all the way up to 100. And then it's 14 minutes per lung field. And then he sits back up at the end of his treatment and he looks over at me, and I'll never forget it. It was a very profound moment. And he says, "Hey, Doc, I'm feeling better. Is it okay if I order a strawberry milkshake?"
So that was your first patient. How many have you done since?
So 10 patients were enrolled into the study. It's a pilot study. It's a very small study. We're a community hospital. We didn't really have the structure in place to run a large trial. 5 patients were in the treatment group. 5 patients were in the control group. I can't comment on the outcomes. What I can tell you is that we are in the midst of finishing the manuscript as we speak. We're going to be submitting to the New England Journal of Medicine. That should mean something.
Wow.
So everybody knows that's the #1 journal in the world for, disclosing important information. We actually should have another case report on another very interesting patient that was accepted to another journal. Hopefully that will be published later this week. So the second patient within the study that had results will also be available in publication. So it's real. I am very confident that this is a viable supportive treatment for COVID. But what we need, and anybody out there listening, this is super important. We need an academic center to pick up the baton and run with this. And that is really what our message is. Let's get a larger randomized controlled trial here so we can further prove the science of this. Wouldn't it be great? We're all worried about COVID. Do I get the vaccine? Do I not get the vaccine? What happens if I get sick? What if we actually have a viable treatment with the use of light by plugging it into the wall with no medicines and no risk of complication. It's
Well,
pretty.
who sells the laser? Who's the laser manufacturer?
So the laser manufacturer is Assa Laser, which is located in Vicenza, Italy, which is just outside of Venice. The laser distributor in North America is is Cutting Edge Laser. And then the name of the laser is actually called the MLS laser. It's the multi-wave locked system. And the reason that this laser is so unique is, number one, it's a class 4 laser, so it's high powered. Number two, it has pulsed energy, which prevents the issue for complication, for the issue of blisters, etc. And then the mobile scanner is great in the setting of COVID because you never touch the patient. We still decontaminate when we roll out of the room, but again, nobody's physically touching the patient during the treatment, which is pretty amazing. So these lasers, are purposed for acute and chronic inflammation, FDA cleared for that purpose. In order to get in an on-label use, obviously, we're going to have to get some studies done to prove that to the FDA. Although I would argue and say at this point right now, if, like, for example, if my mother came down with COVID, I'd bring the laser home and I would use it on her. You can, as a physician, as you know, use anything that's off-label as long as you have individual consent with that patient to go over the risks,
Sure.
benefits, and alternatives of the use of it. So we have the ability to do so, but what we can't do is just use it outright and say that it works without having some sort of proof.